Welcome back. Today we're looking at something really different. A strategy that doesn't just ask for change, it basically forces it by creating a massive financial incentive.
This quote, it really says it all, doesn't it? The whole idea we're unpacking today is built on this really powerful, maybe a little cynical premise. If a system only listens to money, well then, money is the language you have to speak.
So let's get into the core idea. This isn't about asking people to do the right thing. It's way more clever than that. Some have called it financial judo because it uses the system's own momentum, its drive for profit, against itself to change its direction.
Okay, to really get this, think about this house on fire analogy. It's simple, but it's perfect. Imagine a neighborhood where houses just keep catching on fire. Now imagine there's a company that has to pay out $1 million every single time a house burns down. If enough families get fire insurance all at once, suddenly every fire becomes this huge, predictable bill. At that point, the company has a choice: keep paying out millions or spend a little to help prevent the fires. It just becomes cheaper to solve the problem.
All right, so that's the analogy. Now let's look at the real-world numbers that make a strategy like this so necessary.
This number, it's tough to look at. We're talking about roughly 3,000 young Black people between the ages of just 13 and 24 lost to homicide every single year. Let that sink in. That's more than 5 young people every single day. This is the crisis that this strategy is built to address.
And it's not just a statistic. For Black youth and young adults in America, homicide is the #1 cause of death, period. For decades, we've tried all the traditional approaches, and they just haven't moved the needle. The whole point of the SHIELD initiative is to say, okay, appealing to conscience hasn't worked, it's time to start talking about cost.
So here's the pivot. How do you take a public health crisis and turn it into a balance sheet problem for a massive industry? This is where the math behind it all gets really, really interesting.
First up, let's look at what this would actually cost a family.
Okay, so you see this table, and it looks like pretty standard insurance stuff, right? For a $2 million policy, a family in a high-risk area might pay, say, $400 to $600 a month. Yeah, that's a real cost. But here's the thing. That payment isn't just a bill. It's the fuel for the whole engine. Every single premium is part of creating this massive financial leverage we're about to break down.
All right, so that's the cost for one family. But what happens when you scale that up? What does the risk look like for the entire insurance industry?
And this is where it gets wild. Look at these numbers. Let's say just a quarter, 25% of the target group enrolls. That's 1.5 million policies. Based on the current, tragic homicide rates, that means about 1,650 claims a year. And with a $2 million policy, you do the math. That's a staggering $3.3 billion in liability for the insurance industry every single year. Suddenly, this isn't some social issue they can put out a statement about. It's a huge, predictable, multi-billion-dollar hole in their finances.
That number right there, $3.3 billion, that's the financial bomb at the heart of this entire plan. That's a number that's impossible to ignore. It forces action.
And this brings us to the tipping point. This is where that financial judo move really lands. It's the moment when it becomes cheaper and more profitable for the industry to actually help solve the problem, rather than just pay for the consequences.
So let's put that $3.3 billion in perspective. The entire insurance industry spends about $172 million a year on federal lobbying to protect its interests. The liability we're talking about is over 19 times that amount. 19! You can't just lobby a problem that big away. The math becomes crystal clear. It is way, way cheaper to fund violence prevention programs than it is to keep writing these massive checks.
But of course, any smart plan has to think a few moves ahead. The system is obviously going to fight back, right? So let's look at the likely countermoves.
And the first question everyone asks is, well, wait a minute, won't the insurance companies just refuse to sell the policies or jack up the rates so no one can afford them?
And yeah, you can pretty much predict what they'd try to do. They could use zip codes to price people out, just flat out deny applications in certain areas, or go to regulators and try to get the policy amounts capped. You know, the standard corporate playbook for avoiding risk.
But here is the absolute genius of the strategy's design. These policies are actually profitable for the insurance companies to sell. So if they start systematically denying coverage to one specific group of people, young Black men, they're walking right into a massive discrimination lawsuit. So now they're trapped. Taking the money creates financial risk, but refusing to take the money creates an even bigger legal and financial risk. Every move they make to defend themselves just makes their situation worse.
Okay, so this isn't just some theory on a whiteboard. There's an actual practical plan for how to make this real.
First, to make sure families can actually afford the premiums, the plan calls for something called the Shield Fund. Think of it as a nonprofit cooperative. It pools money from donors to help subsidize the costs, making it accessible for everyone. It's really a modern version of the mutual aid groups that have been a cornerstone of the Black community for generations.
And when you look at the math to fund this thing, it's kind of mind-blowing how achievable it is. To help fund 200,000 policies, Black households making over $100,000 a year would only need to chip in about $6 a month. $6! For Black millionaire households, it's around $33 a month. I mean, we are literally talking about the price of a Netflix subscription to create billions of dollars in leverage. That's what makes this feel so incredibly doable.
And you don't have to boil the ocean all at once. The idea is to start with a focused pilot program. You could pick one city, say Chicago or Philly, and just focus on the handful of zip codes with the highest risk. That alone could be enough to prove the model works and create enough financial pressure to bring the industry to the table, and you can do it all with a way smaller initial investment.
There's this great twist on a famous Frederick Douglass quote that just perfectly sums up the whole philosophy here. Power concedes nothing without a demand. It especially does not concede without a bill. This isn't an appeal, it's an invoice.
And really, that's what this all boils down to. The question isn't, can this work? The math is pretty clear on that. The real question is much deeper. Are we willing to make indifference so expensive that it's no longer an option?